Instead of the usual portrait, today's painting is all about painting an impressionist style hand. While creating the hand painting today, I'm going to start with the usual game plan that I have for creating a portrait. Now, during the initial block-in stage of the hand, I start with the darkest areas first. It's always best to start with the darkest areas because the paints that make up the black paint on my palette are a little bit more transparent than the white paint, the titanium white that's on the opposite end of my palette. So at this point, I am really just focusing on those dark areas of the hand, that lower area below the thumb, the underside of those two fingers that have a lot of shadow areas, and then that's the first areas I really want to sort of hone in on. After that part is figured out, I start slowly working in the locations of the other fingers. Now, I'm not obsessed right now with how accurate or perfect those locations are. It's just a starting point for me. The next area that I start to look at is that slightly less dark area behind the hand. That's not quite as black as the shadows on the fingers and the backside of the hand. That shadow that's happening back there is just a little bit lighter and has a little bit more of a purple hue to it. So I start to look at that to help really massage the whole composition into place. Now at this point, I decide to start working in some of the more mid-tone areas of the painting. And this is all going to help to get this hand located correctly on the panel. The way I approach this hand is not that much different than how I approach my portrait painting. I start with the darks, work my way into the midtones, but as far as the drawing process, using angles, using relationships between the different fingers, just like you would the relationship between like where the eyes are located and the bottom of the nose, the mouth, all of these have a location that is relative to something else. So as long as you're looking at the painting as a whole, you're looking at where those upper fingers are located and how that angle down to the ring finger, what that angle is from the tip of the middle finger down to the ring finger, those angles, seeing the length of the fingers, seeing the shapes that each individual finger makes, the thickness of the fingers, all of these shapes that you see have relationships to other things that will really help you draw this just like you could draw a portrait or a landscape. All of these things have relationships that you can use to help you draw it. Now, with this painting, one of the other aspects that's very helpful is using the negative space around the hand. Because my reference image is cropped exactly the same as my panel surface, I have an 8x10 panel. The reference image is also an 8x10 aspect ratio. You can use the negative space to really help you draw the location of the hand. Now, these skills that I'm talking about, being able to see shapes and angles and relationships, isn't a natural thing that we all are just automatically going to figure out on the first painting. Now, for me personally, when I was younger, I always loved drawing things from life, and I think that really helped because I started so early. It really helped to make the transition into doing more complex things like drawing a hand or a portrait. Those things became a little bit easier because it was ingrained in my mind at a younger age. So for some of you that maybe are getting started late with portrait painting or figurative painting, don't be frustrated if your first 10, 20 paintings are just go really slow. I remember the first time I did a portrait, it took at least 10 times longer than it would take me today to do the drawing portion of a painting, and I wasn't thinking about any of the complex things that I'm trying now with all these interesting colors, the abstraction. Those were things that I built on top of the very simple initial drawing skills that I learned over the last 20 years. And if you're transitioning from drawing with pencil or charcoal and trying to get into painting, I would say just jump right in and expect there to be a bit of a tough transition. I would even suggest doing the drawing stage with a paintbrush. Don't even use a pencil or charcoal, just jump right in with your brush and get a good handle on how the oil paint flows. There's no reason you can't draw with a brush just as well as you can with a pencil after some practice. Keeping it simple is always the best way to go. That's why I like to just stick with a brush the whole way through. I also keep it simple by making sure that my palette is, for the most part, set up before I even start painting. That way my brain's focus is just on drawing. That's all I'm doing right now, is drawing with a paintbrush. The colors I have in my palette, they're there, they're ready to go, so I don't even have to think about it that much. Now let's say you're at about this point with your hand painting or your portrait, and you're just looking at it and you go, what is wrong with this image? Why does it feel slightly off? What can I do to make it better? Well, the good news is it means when you're starting to ask these questions, it means that you're really getting close. There are probably just some very small things you have to do, whether it's very subtle shifts in tone, whether it's slightly shifting the shape locations. Some of these things could get down to moving things 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch to make it feel right. So when you're really just staring at this thing and not really able to hone in on exactly what's wrong, maybe take a 5-minute break, take a 10-minute break, come back to it, and it may just instantly show up the part that is just not matching with your reference image. And that happens to me all the time. I try different things, like looking at it from a distance, looking at it closer up, maybe turning the canvas a different direction and just seeing it from a completely different angle. All these tricks are out there. Give them a try, because once you're getting close, once you're really narrowing it down, that's a good sign that you just have to shift things a little bit here and there to get it to really lock in and start to make complete sense. Now at this point, I'm just having my bit of fun with this painting. I decided to throw in some abstract colors and things like that, but it's this part of the painting where it becomes my own voice, it becomes my own unique style, and this is something I'll definitely be talking about in later videos. But for now, I'd say keep things simple, try to focus on just the drawing stage with your paints, see how that goes, and slowly build up your skill level as you see fit. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on this painting and my methods. Feel free to shoot me some different questions that you have. Feel free to check me out on Patreon, where I do a lot of in-depth tutorials, and next week I'll be jumping back over to portraits. So have a great week, and I will talk to you soon.